Okay, this video is called Mating Suppression Theory. You can decide what you think of it for yourself. Okay, and the basic idea here is that anything that decreases the population of the Native American Christian population tends to be favored and subsidized. And we'll just start. There's a whole bunch of things that add into this. First of all, there's anti-fertility poisons in the tap water. Fluoride and aluminum decrease reproductive capacity. The man in particular, the woman also, the estrogenic chemicals in the water contribute to all this. Baby formula toxins. There's soy in the baby formula, which can cause premature puberty, deformity of the female reproductive tract. There's aluminum in there, bad for fertility. BPA plastic on the inner lining of a formula can. The aluminum of the can itself. Plastic bottles. You know, the parents aren't taught not to put those in microwaves, and the plastic melts into the baby formula. The women are only given 3 months typically of maternity leave, which is really not enough. They should be breastfeeding for a minimum of 6 months, preferably longer than that, as long as 2 or 3 years. The non-organic processed food, it routinely contains soy sprayed with glyphosate, highly estrogenic stuff. That's the cheap protein in processed food. The cheap sweetener is corn, high fructose corn syrup, sprayed with atrazine and often contaminated with mercury. All of these things, fluoride, aluminum, mercury, all this stuff dumbs down the population. The majority of estrogenic chemicals are also neurotoxic, about 80% of them, and about 20% of them are goitrogenic, thyroid toxic. Okay, there's a big push to always get the mother out of the house, because once you get the mother out of the house, the kids can be taken over by the programs to make them stupid. Public schools are not designed to help children. They're designed to hurt them, to make them stupid, to make them incompetent. In grade school, they use a look-say method, which is, it's obvious. It creates dyslexia and poor readers. And that's done on purpose to make kids incompetent, semi-illiterate. Most people are functional illiterates, meaning that they have a vague capacity to read, but they don't read on a routine basis anything significant. So their ability to process information is rather weak. They teach an anti-Christian worldview. Like, I was sort of on the tail end of stuff. Back when I went to grade school, to public school, and we sang, songs that were very patriotic. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty. We said the Pledge of Allegiance, in God we trust. We were sort of taught that Russia was the evil atheist empire, but we were in God we trust, the republic. Okay, they also teach nowadays multiculturalism, sort of hate the traditional white Christian culture, the WASP culture, whatever you want to call it. And they do terrible things to children. They castrate children, okay? You can call it gender-affirming surgery. You can call it whatever you want, but you're cutting off some little kid's Johnson, okay? That's evil, all right? The kid don't know any better. The little boys and girls, they don't know any better. They're not ready for that. Okay, they're drugging kids with amphetamines. You can call it medical psychiatric therapy for attention deficit. It's bullshit. You're giving these kids brain damage with amphetamines. That's insane. So what they do nowadays is they use a euphemism to pretend that something totally evil is good. Millions and millions of babies get a death sentence because they call it woman's choice. Okay, and women think now they're doing some wonderful thing by getting rid of more and more babies, all right? Making them into an evil society, okay? And they use those babies to make medications that people eat. So abortion leads to cannibalism, and it also leads to infanticide. And all of this leads to population reduction of the native population, and that's a big part of its intention. So anything that's going to get subsidized, well, gee, it almost seems like the committees say, well, will this reduce the native population? We'll do it, subsidize it. So their taxpayer money goes to support these public schools designed to destroy their children, and this processed food subsidized garbage designed to make them fat, sick, and stupid and infertile. Okay, in the high schools, they're given standardized tests which dumb them down because they focus on meaningless standardized tests rather than learning anything useful. Also, there's too much emphasis on mathematics. Mathematics is mostly a waste of time. And I say that, I'm a triple boarded, Stanford, Harvard educated doctor, but I don't use any math I didn't know after about 3rd grade. What's the point of learning all that stuff? You don't use it. Almost nobody uses it, okay? And I'm a high-tech doctor too. I had to study all this mathematics to get where I was, but I never use any of it. None, zero. Nothing that I didn't know by 3rd grade. They also hide the history of Western civilization and Christianity from the students in the high school, so they grow up very uneducated about their cultural roots, where they come from. They teach them all this nonsense about, oh, you're racist, about multiculturalism, hatred of white people. They make birth control pills very easily available to the high school students. And the other thing, too, is when I was young, almost all the parents were married. So there was nowhere to go for a party except where there was divorced parents, because then the mom would often be poor and have to work. And that's how kids ended up starting having sex a lot, too, is when birth control was available for the kids at a young age, and then there'd be a divorced house where there were no parents, and then people would all go over there to have sex. But that was sort of something that I saw coming in as I was going out of the high school age. When I was young, guys, like all my friends had married. I knew one guy I could think of whose parents were divorced. Okay, and basically of the girls that were promiscuous, that was a key thing, that they didn't have parents in the house because the parents were divorced, so now they're poor, so now mom has to work, so now the girl's in the house with no parent to supervise her, and the high school making it easy for or the Planned Parenthood or whatever, making it easy for the girl to get birth control, and so they'd end up having a lot of sex and sex parties, okay? Let's see, what else? Let's see, encouraging promiscuity in the young men and women, and especially for the girls. It hurts the girls more than it hurts the boys, because the more promiscuous a girl gets, the less likely she's ever going to be able to sustain a marriage, run a family, or be useful as a wife, okay? And I see all these women nowadays with all these tattoos. They're freaking disgusting, okay? And I see these women on these talk shows. You know, I'm kind of lucky. I was a pretty successful guy. So I've kind of, had my pick of really pretty, top of the line women. But man, I saw these women too back when I was initially divorced. Man, they're disgusting. It's one after another, fat slob with a tattoo. I mean, they're repulsive. And I can see they're not going to be able to ever find a man. No man wants that. She's sleazy, she's got a bunch of tattoos, and she's really fat. No guy wants that. Okay? I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just saying, what I saw when I was younger, there was almost an expectation you get married as soon as you're like a senior in college, okay? And I used to think getting married young was stupid because you're not really fully developed yet, and you might change and you might regret getting married young. But now I look back on it and gosh, I wish I got married younger and had more kids. I wish I had more kids. Kids is one of the, the things in life that's real. You go to your job, you got to do all kinds of BS like on an assembly line to make money, and that can be kind of annoying and frustrating. But having kids is a real thing. They're fun, they're like pets, but even more interesting, They're expensive though. They get real expensive as they get older. That's one of the bad things, but it's one of the good things in life. It's something you want to do. There's nothing like having kids. By the time you're 30, you've done everything. You've gone to the parties, you've gone out, you know what that's like, but there's nothing like having kids. Okay, the other thing I've seen is they tell women that feminism is a good thing. They basically train the women to hate the men and to think that housewives are losers, so they don't want to have kids. I remember dating a female doctor, and she's like, she thought having a kid would be like the worst thing in the world. And I'm like, what do you mean it's the worst thing in the world? And she was all into this idea of having a big fancy house. That was important to her, but having a kid, God forbid, maybe when she was almost 40. And I'm like, well, see you later. I'm not going to wait around for that. The longer a woman stays in school, to get her, bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD, doctorate, postdoctorate, etc., the fewer babies she's going to have. And they say that a woman's school academic IQ is inversely proportional to her biologic IQ. And so we're sort of generating a progressively stupider and stupider population, whereby the more sort of high IQ women are less likely to have kids at all. And if they do have kids, it's usually very few. And I've dated my share of doctors and talked to lots of female doctors, and they're not that interested in having kids and families. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of exceptions, but I know a lot of real nice, pretty doctors never got married, never had kids, or, later on went through in vitro fertilization or something, and they regret it. No-fault divorce is designed to break apart families, and they like to give the money to the woman because women are more likely to throw money in a garbage can. And I'm so sick of all this equality bullshit. It's completely untrue. I talk to all my guy friends, and the wives all outspend their husbands by far, okay? As a guy, I don't need any money. I don't even need to spend almost anything. I'm perfectly happy just read a book all day. And you know me, I'm be writing a book, making a YouTube video. I've only been on a plane once in the last 28 years, whereas, just to give you a little perspective, in 1 year, my wife went to Europe 4 times, Japan for 3 weeks, Florida 3 times. What I'm trying to say is, my experience, women love traveling compared to men. I know there's exceptions, but they do in what I've seen, okay? I've seen all the dating things. They want to travel. That's like a very common thing, a picture of themselves in all these different places, wanting to travel. My new girlfriend's already pissed off at me because I'm not eager to travel. I'm like, what the hell do I want to travel for? To me, it's a waste of time. Like going to the beach all day. I don't want to go to the beach all day. I think it's because a person doesn't have goals. I've got goals. I want to complete this book. I want to complete this project or something. So I don't care about going someplace, I would love to go see the Vatican in person, but, I'm pretty happy to have seen all the pictures of it. Okay, anyways, getting back to meritocracy. They destroy meritocracy. So again, they don't reward talent, skill, training, and effort. They sort of reward all this bullshit, And it also doesn't apply to the talented minorities. I'm like, I'm actually a minority. I'm half Puerto Rican. But I've never had anybody offer me a job or even a lecture because I'm Puerto Rican, which I find kind of funny. I'm like a world expert on study skills. No Hispanic group ever wants me to talk about study skills or any minority groups. I think it's funny that they're fake, okay? They're looking for puppetry, and they're also trying to just, take away opportunity from whites and from other ethnic groups. They're not necessarily trying to help the minorities, is what I'm trying to say. If they were, they would hire me. I would teach on study skills for free. I'd be happy to. But they won't call me. They won't ask me. I've actually written to a whole bunch of them. Okay, they destroy meritocracy. It's like a sports team. Could you imagine a sports professional team wanting to take the shortest, slowest, weakest midget person to be the leader of their team? No way. That'd be insane. Well, why should, a medical school want to take the worst possible student? Why shouldn't they want the best? But I'll tell you why it happens. Because most of these big corporations and hospitals and medical schools are monopolies. They don't care about quality. Quality's a joke, okay? If you're just going to lie to the customer and sell them drugs, then what do you need skill and talent and all this other stuff for? No, you're just going to sell them a drug based on a protocol written out in advance, So that's the ability to pill, send the bills. What I'm trying to say is a lot of corporations are like that. They're just going to offer a generic piece of crap. They have a monopoly, and they don't need quality. They don't need skill and talent. Okay, we talked about abortion. We didn't really briefly get into open borders, but again, these are all things to diminish the native population of the country. Let in illegal aliens, especially ones that hate the natives of the country. Give them preference for welfare. Give them preference for promotion. Give them preference in the legal system. And that's like that whole McKinsey stuff. And this is all being done, and this is all, and it's called the mating suppression theory. Everything is leading to diminishment of the native Christian population. And it's all happening, and that's the principle of consilience. Consilience means that if you have, let's say, this is the potential conclusion right here. 1 little piece of evidence by itself, not so strong. 2 little pieces, not so strong. 3 little pieces pointing that way, well, maybe it's true. 4 little pieces, maybe it's true. 5 pieces of evidence all pointing in that direction. So all these small pieces of evidence together is a big piece of evidence in aggregate that, that consilience theory is correct. So anyways, that's what's going on. It's good to have a little bit of understanding, and not that it means you can do anything about it, but you're at least more aware of it.